Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, January 1st. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Rose Bowl game against Oregon is today. The game against Michigan in 332 days. We are here at the Rose Bowl Media headquarters right now. Tom Orr joined by Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can see behind us, they are breaking down the set for the Dan Lanning, Ryan Day joint press conference. That was the last official event before the Rose Bowl starts. And Tony, boy, what was your big takeaway from 30 minutes with the head coaches of the Oregon Ducks and the Ohio State Buckeyes?
Well, I think one of the great takeaways is that Dan Lanning sometimes tries to use words that don't lead anywhere, like say things without saying anything. Ryan Day will, over the years, he'll give you more and more answers. But again, what is he really talking about in this kind of matchup? So I think some of the questions about the future of college football, those we're not going to go anywhere today because the future of college football is the present, that is today, right now, the most important thing for everybody. I mean, there are some topics that they will have to explore down the road about the future of the sport. But overall, Tom, I think in this one, the lesson that I took is the team that blocks the best, tackles the best, and really adapts the best to the first quarter, second quarter, on and on, will be the team that ends up victorious based on what I've heard so far.
Yeah, that was definitely something that both coaches said. Both coaches agreed on a lot of stuff in terms of the big picture stuff. They didn't want to answer stuff. You know, who's an unsung hero in your life who helps get you there. Both of them, it was their wives, which as soon as the first person said their wife, I was like, oh boy, I hope the second guy says his wife, because, oh. So both coaches, excellent game managers. With in terms of that one?
Well, I would say Dan Lanning answered first, and he said, my wife's Sophia. And then Ryan Day, his first response is like, same. And I wanted to be like,
say more, Ryan. And he did.
Right,
he did talk about, he and Nina have known each other since they were 6 years old. There's a picture of them floating around somewhere they're both on the same T-ball team, so they have really genuinely known each other pretty much their whole lives. So we got the thanking the academy. We got thanking the spouse who got you there.
It's an honor to be nominated and play at the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. I did appreciate Ryan Day admitting that before the game at the Rose Bowl, it's sensory overload.
It is, yeah. He talked about the grass is just greener there than it is anywhere else. The sky is bluer, the sun is yellower. It just, and you think about growing up watching the Rose Bowl, it is always in Ohio 32 degrees and lightly misting and a little bit of wind and kind of overcast, maybe a little fog. And then you turn on the Rose Bowl and it's like Dorothy going into, from Kansas into Oz, and it's just like, whoa, where did all this color come from? You definitely do get that sense of the Rose Bowl. That was nice. They were asked about, what moment are you looking to experience? What moment are you really hoping to really be able to soak in? And Dan Lanning took that one first and said, well, hope when the clock hits 0, we have more points than they do, which, okay, probably could have guessed that. Didn't need the press conference for that. We were at the point of this week where it feels like you've kind of, every time we get to this point of this week, it's kind of like, what has not been asked yet already? And the answer is always like, as it turns out, everything's already been asked.
Yeah, and stuff that you would like to ask, I guess you probably could have done it yesterday. When you're trying to ask about the future, like we try to sometimes treat this as a media day, a July media day, when you can ask all these wide-ranging things, and it's like, dude, I got a game.
Yeah,
I got a game to play for. Like yesterday, I wanted to ask Keenan Bailey about Max Clare, the tight end transfer. He's like, Tony, I appreciate it, but I'm here. I'm focused on the Rose Bowl. We could talk in a month. Like the fact that there are people like, I don't want to talk about anything else. I'm only worried about this. I'm only focused on this, and that's what this was mostly today. Even when both coaches were asked about the moment that you look forward to, just like, can you stop and soak it in? Dan Lanning's like, yeah, I mean, during the game, no. And that was essentially Ryan Day's thing as well. Like, before the game, sure, it's cool. But once the game is going on, like, you're not looking around the third quarter for jump around, or there's no Rose Bowl jump around to just soak in and enjoy.
No, so yeah, we'll see at the end of the third quarter whether the Ohio State fans are singing Hang On Sloopy a little more enthusiastically, or the Oregon fans singing Shout a little more enthusiastically.
Are they doing a joint, like one after the other?
I can't imagine that they are, but I don't know, maybe. Who knows? It's whatever the Rose Bowl tradition is, I'm sure they will do that. So All right, so the coaches didn't want to talk about the game a whole lot, and especially any specifics. There was questions about how you're going to, change what you did from the first game, and how to adapt. And it was kind of like, well, would you like the game plan? And that's sort of been like a running joke among the coaching community. It feels like this college football playoff season. So no, well, yes, I'm sure everyone would have loved the game plan. No, they were not going to be particularly forthcoming with it. So I guess, Tony, it's up to us to talk intelligently and interestingly about the game. So here we are,
per usual.
Buckle up. Here we go. What is the one thing, I ask you this all the time, one stat, like if I tell you, hey, you can only tell me one stat, all right, I can tell you one stat, and that is the thing that you go, okay, here's, if I see this stat, I will know that Ohio State wins, and if I see that stat, I will know that Oregon has probably won.
How many times does Dylan Gabriel get tackled in the backfield? And that's not necessarily sacks, that's just getting him down and keeping him from creating, because I don't know that Oregon's going to rush for a ton of yards. I don't know if 150, that's a good number. But if they can just get to Dylan Gabriel and create some chaos and some havoc, and then also bring him down, because sometimes when you create that havoc, it also works out for Oregon. So I think that, if there are no 30-yard pass plays, Ohio State has given up 6 this season. 4 of them came against Oregon. So what's the number there that they need to be under? Say, well, no more than 2. Well, what if those 2 go for 80?
Right,
and
right.
So with these kinds of teams, like, no one thing other than, like, if you hold Oregon to 60 yards rushing, that's going to be a huge thing. I do think, Tom, as I was writing about this game this morning and thinking about it, Ohio State defensively can have the same exact game they did the first time, which was terrible, right? And win.
Yeah, they absolutely could. And, the defense gave up some big plays, but they also had a drive that got started on the 25-yard line, right? So you don't turn the ball over there. That was the Derek Harmon strip of Quinshon Judkins. Take those points off the board, ta-da, Ohio State wins. Take off the 3 points that Oregon got on the onside kick. You're right. I mean,
and whatever points Ohio State may have scored from that drive.
Correct. Yeah. So it is definitely, in a game with margins that close, it doesn't take much to change the balance. Now, the challenge, of course, is for both of these teams. You've seen Ohio State not be able to beat Oregon once this year. You've also seen Oregon just barely beat Ohio State in their home stadium, with a lot of stuff not going right for Ohio State. And then I know the Oregon fans are going to say, well, what about the... And everyone has the, the 5 plays, the whatabouts. And, what about this? And then it would have been a 10-point Oregon win. What about this? And it would have been a 7-point Ohio State win. And you could kind of talk yourself in circles about that all week long. And folks have been doing that in our comment sections all week long. But when you look at a game like this, it feels like we're probably headed for another close one, in my mind. And I have been just procrastinating putting in my game pick, because I think this is going to be a close game. It's probably going to be a very well-played, exciting game that ends very close, very dramatically, potentially one of these great classic Rose Bowls. I just can't quite put my finger on the score for this one. It's just normally there's a point in the week where I go, okay, I got it, this is it. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong. This is not like I'm clairvoyant. It's like... No,
it's certainly not.
Sometimes I get the score exactly right or off by a point, and sometimes I'm off by 3 touchdowns, and it happens.
Sometimes you just have a good sense of where the score is going to be. Because there are really only so many scores that it could be against some teams. But this one, I expect both teams to score, but I'm fascinated to find out about Ohio State's defense. Like, how much better is it now than the one that gave up 32 points to Oregon? And if it's a lot better, then shouldn't they give up fewer than at least a touchdown less, right? And if they do that, then how does Ohio State not score 27?
Right, and you look at the history of games where teams are playing for a second time in a season, and a lot of times the second game is lower scoring than the first. Ohio State's 2 examples in modern history are 1975, where they beat UCLA something 40 to 17 or something in the first game, and then lost the second game, something in the 20s to 10. And then in the 2019 season, they beat Wisconsin 38-7, and the second one was 31-17 or 31-20, something like that. It was much closer.
Even Jim Knowles has done this once in his career. Played Baylor twice, I think in 2021, and the second game, I think Oklahoma State lost.
Yeah. So this show is just kind of turning into like a this is my scratch paper where I'm sort of working this out in my head. It does seem like the Ohio State defense is better than it was before. Plus the rematch tends to be a little lower scoring. So so now I'm sort of narrowing myself down into probably winning team in the 20s, something like that. So like a 28-24 kind of game, something in that neighborhood. And I could talk myself into that. When I'm looking at this, all week, the thing that it's just been sort of rattling around my head is, okay, which is the weakest of the four units of these, Ohio State offense, Ohio State defense, Oregon defense. That's one of the things where if I'm not sure what to do, I kind of look and I go, okay, which of you has the worst whatever it is, and that team is probably not going to win. And to me, that's the Oregon defense is potentially the weak link of the four. And it's not that the Oregon defense is terrible. It's just that the Ohio State offense, the Oregon offense, and the Ohio State defense are all among the top 5 in the country by pretty much any metric. And the Oregon defense is like in the 20s or the 30s, depending on which metric you want to look at. Is that something that you're thinking about when you're trying to figure out? Because normally when we watch a couple games with these teams, like we watched with Tennessee or watching Georgia a couple years ago, you go in going, okay, we've seen them at their best, we've seen them at their worst, we've seen them at their kind of like medium points. You kind of have an idea like where the outer bounds of this are, and obviously we see every Ohio State game. This year with Oregon, we saw them beat Ohio State in a great game where neither team played perfectly. We saw them look like absolute butt cheeks at Wisconsin. We saw them get absolutely just annihilate Washington, and then we saw them get run over by Penn State and have to win a shootout. And it's like, okay, so is this the team that's going to play in the 40s with Penn State, or the team that's going to win 16-13 against Wisconsin? And they can kind of do it all. It just they have won every game they've played, and they've won every game that's been in all these different sort of buckets of games. So I guess to get back to my point about the Oregon defense, is that the thing that is the deciding factor in this game?
It's unfortunate that as we watched the Wisconsin-Washington Penn State game, we did not get to see them face a passing offense that was legitimate. Like, we got to see that against Tennessee. They got to play some teams that quarterbacks really tore them up. They didn't get to face any kind of those offenses. Now, freshman quarterback DeMond Williams for Washington went 17 of 20 against them, so that's something. But Penn State's passing game, the receivers, they haven't faced any kind of receivers since Ohio State. And Ohio State went for 320-some yards through the air. So I think the secondary is the weak point. I like Oregon's linebackers. We like the defensive line. They disappeared against Penn State for whatever reason. But, yeah, that secondary. And it is kind of similar to Tennessee. I've not been so bullish on the fact that if you just protect Will Howard, you will win, like I was against Tennessee, because of that secondary. But these corners can be had. The safeties, do you remember many plays being made by the safeties in the 3 games? But did they need to, other than coming down and trying to crash on Penn State's running game, which apparently they didn't do very well, because Penn State went for 292 yards on the ground.
Yeah, it's so hard to square the games that we've seen, because you get such different performances. And as you said, Washington, they threw the ball for a high completion percentage. They didn't pick up a million yards. Wisconsin has not been able to throw on anyone all season, and Penn State didn't really need to throw on anyone. And their offense is so Tyler Warren-centric that it's like it kind of doesn't apply. Even if it works, it's kind of not what Ohio State does. So, all right, so have you settled in on a score prediction?
I did send mine in.
Okay. Well, I'm going to listen to you say yours, but I think I'm dialing in. I think, why don't you go first?
I went 34-24, Ohio State.
Okay.
Again, this offense is really difficult to stop. Oregon's offense is really difficult to stop. So is Ohio State's. I think Ohio State is going to be a little bit better defensively. So if they're better defensively, shouldn't there be fewer points on the board? And I think offensively, they left some points on the board against Oregon the first time. And I'm not saying that. Now, I do have an issue with my score, and as we're talking about it now, that I apparently have them kicking 2 field goals.
I was going to say, we haven't talked special teams yet.
So that is a concern that, again, I was typing this out on my phone, and just trying to get it in, because, again, just putting it off and not necessarily having time. And so I settled in on 34-24, and then after the fact, I'm like, well, how did they get there? That's not important right now.
Too late. I've already hit the send button. Nothing can be done about that. Yeah, I think 24 feels about right for Oregon, and I could see Ohio State getting into the 30s. I'm going to say, though, that this is a closer game, that this is like a 28-24 Ohio State game. It just feels like it's going to be a little lower scoring than the first time. It's going to be tight like it was the last time. It should be a very, very close game. I'm expecting an absolute classic. And this is one of these things where you don't want to get college game day where they pick, everyone picks the same team. Like, I was fully prepared to pick Oregon. And then, when they announced the bracket, to think, okay, Ohio State's, we don't know what Oregon's going to look like coming in off of all of this rest. Are they going to be rusty, or are they going to be fresh? Is Ohio State going to be a little bit beat up from the last game, or are they going to be in their sort of normal rhythm? And we haven't seen this in the college football playoff yet, where one team has the bye and one team doesn't. So we're all going to be kind of learning this together on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I just think this is going to be a close game. And, at that point, hey, the difference between Ohio State blowing Penn State out and barely beating Penn State was Will Howard fumbled the ball here instead of here. And it was just, and the ball went out of the end zone instead of being a touchdown. And so Penn State got the ball back. That was a 7-point swing right there. And it was that. And in a game like this, there's going to be a play. There's going to be do they call the offensive pass interference or don't they? Do they rule that this was a fumble or do they not on a tight end down the middle for the Oregon fans? There's going to be a bunch of that stuff. Did Will Howard slide with 1 second left or 0 seconds left? It's going to come down to something like that. And it should be, I was thinking about the 2006 Rose Bowl, the USC and Texas one, the Vince Young, Reggie Bush game. And I think you could be in for that kind of game where it's reasonably high scoring. It was, the 1997 Rose Bowl, Ohio State, Arizona State, was a classic, but it was a classic for like 5 minutes. That was a 55 minutes. That was a crappy football game. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh boy, and everyone's scoring and it's very exciting. This could be a 60-minute, if you get what you got in Eugene, this is an all-timer.
Yeah, this is a rematch of arguably the game of the year. So I wrote about it today. It's the rematch of the year, basically. Name a bigger rematch this year, Tom. I don't think you can.
I don't think I can.
I think everybody is expecting another classic. The crowd is going to be incredible. Both coaches talked about how electric it's going to be in there. I'm looking forward to seeing what the makeup is of the colors in there. Probably some Christmas colors, some holiday colors in there. I'm expecting. So I can't wait to get there. We're going to get there as early as possible and just soak it all in and get it to you guys.
Well, we will have more coming up a little later on the 31st. Have a live show coming up a little later on in the afternoon. I'm going to try and run over to Ohio State marching band practice and see if we can get some of that, some video of that for you guys, maybe some interviews, and throw something together on that, because the band being out here is obviously a big part of the story as well. But man, there's going to be a lot to talk about, and we're going to be talking about all of it at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Hope you guys can join us in both of those places. And if you've been enjoying our content this week, make sure you are subscribed on our YouTube channel. And if you are a Buckeye fan, especially, and you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.